So I'd like to begin and thank you all for coming to listen to this talk. I'm basing my talk on Mahasi Sayadaw's talks on the Ariyavasa Sutta. And the translation for that is the Abodes of the Noble Ones. He would always give Dhamma talks based on some sutta or another. And he would recite the sutta as a preface. And he said that one of the meanings that the word sutta has is that it's like a line, like, for example, a chalk line, the tool that carpenters use when they you stretch out a string that's covered with chalk, or in some countries it's covered with ink, and you use that string to mark a line on the wood. When you can't draw it easily by hand, but with this string, you can how should I do? I'm thinking the Burmese words, you can get the ink to drop on the wood in just the place where you want to saw it or chop it or whatever you want to do. And carpenters do that so that they don't make a mistake. Because if they just approximate where they're going to saw, they might not do it straight. They might make an error. Of course, nowadays we have machine tools that probably can do a lot without having to mark any lines on them. But in places like Burma, they use these chalk lines or ink lines for marking the line. And that's so that the work will be done properly. And in the same way, the teachings of the Buddha, the sermons that the Buddha gave, the suttas are like that. They're guidelines for our practice. And the things that in general the Buddha gave guidelines for were morality. He talked about, for example, the 5 precepts. And he laid down this guideline, for example, for lay people, the 5 precepts: not to kill, not to steal, not to commit adultery, not to lie, not to take drugs and intoxicants. And those are guidelines that Buddhists should practice according to, instead of trying to invent a new lay sila, for example, to make it only 4 precepts or 3 precepts. We should just observe the 5 or other versions that the Buddha taught. And then for concentration, there are 40 different methods of concentration that the Buddha taught, including loving kindness meditation. And so we should follow those guidelines instead of trying to make new methods. And for the development of wisdom also, the Buddha set down guidelines, very many, and we should pick one of those guidelines and practice accordingly, so that the practice will get the results that we would like to have. And so to use a sutta in this way is like ruling lines on paper. Now, in Burma, when I was living there and studying, and we had to take exams on blank pieces of paper because they didn't have ruled paper available for our examinations. So we would have to rule the lines on the paper before we wrote the exam. Of course, some people might feel they can write straight without having to rule a line or follow a line. But Mahasi Sayadaw said he prefers to draw the lines first. So that's what this is here for. So as you can see, these are the words that the Buddha actually said. And of course, you can see the meaning, so that's good. But even if you don't know the meaning, sometimes, just listening to them to the words also is good. And then when people who know Pali hear it, they feel joy. So it's always good to include it. And I appreciate the way the MC has been pronouncing Pali. She does a very good job. So this Asaime Bhikkhave Ariyavasa Ye Ariya Avasimsuva Avasantiwa Avasisantiwa. O monks, these Ariyavasa Dhammas, where the noble ones dwell, are 10. In these 10 abodes of the noble ones, the Aryas or noble ones have dwelt or resided in the past, are dwelling in the present, and will also dwell in the future. So you probably have heard the name, the noble ones, the Aryas, the stream enterer, the once returner, the non-returner, and the Arahant, or in Pali, Sotapanna, Sakadagami, Anagami, and Arahant. There are actually 8 kinds of noble ones: the people who are realizing the path, and the people who have already realized fruition, who are established in fruition. But practically speaking, the people who are, the realization of the path is only one mind moment. So we really, although it's by name, there are 8 kinds of people, noble people. There are really, we'll just talk about 4. Okay, the Sotapanna or stream winner, the Sakadagami or once returner, the Anagami or non-returner, and the Arahant or the fully enlightened Arahant. So before this Buddha, in the olden days, there were noble ones. Well, where did they live? If we think about it, well, lay people live in their homes. Those of you who are monks, who are listening, you live in your monastery. And in the same way, the noble ones, or the Aryas, they live in the abodes of the noble ones, the Ariyavasa. There were Buddhas before the present one, before the Buddha Gautama, Kassapa or Konamagamana or Kakusanda. They were enlightened, and they had enlightened disciples. And they also lived in these 10 abodes of the noble ones. The noble ones of the present teachings of Gautama Buddha, they also live in these 10 dwellings. And in the future, when there will be Aryamiteya Buddha and his disciples and others, all those enlightened beings will also dwell in these 10 abodes of the noble ones. So as you can see from the list, there are 10. Katamedasa idam bhikkhave bhikkhu panchanga vipahina hoti chalanga samanagato ekarako chatura pasino pano pecheka sato samavya sati sano anavila sankapo pasadakaya sankaro suvimota chitta suvimota panyo. So if you can go forward on this PowerPoint, then you can see what are the 10. In Disasana or dispensation, a monk or a person who sees the dangers of samsara, the cycle of existence, or a person who can destroy the kilesas, the mental defilements, has removed 5 parts, is endowed with 6, has a single guard, has 4 supports, has rejected the independent views or personal truths, has given up all seeking, has unmuddied thought or pure intentions, has tranquilized bodily activities, that means the in-breath and out-breath, and has a well-liberated mind, and has the knowledge that he or she has or is completely liberated. So I'd like to say at this point, you remember in this Ita Bekowe Beku, same as in the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, in this dispensation of bhikkhu. So what kinds of bhikkhus are there? There are actually 2 kinds of bhikkhus, and one of them is the bhikkhu, the way it is defined by the suttas. And the other is the one who, like some of you who are listening, is a bhikkhu according to the monastic discipline. That is, they were ordained. by the Sangha. So these are the two meanings: a monk who is ordained by the Sangha, or, according to the suttas, a bhikkhu is a person who sees the dangers of samsara, the cycle of existence. So, as I think we'll get into those dangers later, but that's one meaning of bhikkhu. And another meaning of the word bhikkhu is one who destroys the mental defilements called kilesas. So, although the Buddha says, "O monks," or he says, "Ita bhikkhave bhikkhu," he means not only ordained monks who were ordained according to the Vinaya. He also means every practitioner who is working to destroy the defilements. If we don't practice the Dhamma, then the mental defilements will grow. But if we practice the Dhamma, then we can eliminate them. And how much of the defilements get eliminated depends on how much we practice. If we can completely eliminate them, then we'll be an arahant, and we can become an arahant. So the practice of sila will overcome the defilements that are so gross that they result in our taking actions such as killing or stealing, sexual misconduct, adultery, for example, lying, or taking drugs and intoxicants. So our morality, our 5 precepts will, when our 5 precepts are established, then we've eliminated those gross kilesas. The practice of samadhi or concentration stabilizes the mind so that the obsessive defilements that tend to arise in the mind, they are suppressed, they don't arise. And the development of wisdom destroys the latent defilements, the ones that are lying dormant and that are ready to arise. For example, when you see that chocolate chip cookie or piece of cake and you want it, that's, to describe one of my defilements, that is the practice of wisdom. When you can eat that chocolate chip cookie mindfully, you can destroy your tendency to crave it. So the practice of vipassana, which is to, every single moment of the time, to observe and know what is happening with our body mind, this destroys the latent defilements. And this is like chopping away at wood with an axe. If we're chopping some wood, bit by bit, pieces of wood are cut off. Or like digging away at the earth with a pickaxe. This will take away the dirt bit by bit. So with every noting, with every observation of our mental physical phenomena that arise at the 6 sense doors, the defilements are being removed and they drop away. So this, when the Buddha says, "Oh monks," he means these are the ordained monks, the ones ordained by the Sangha, but he means also the ones according to the suttas who are practicing meditation, whether a being is a human or a celestial, anyone who is practicing meditation is called a bhikkhu in terms of this discourse. So the first abodes, the Buddha said to remove, oh, sorry, I think I've missed something. I'm trying to think. Okay, so before I talk about the first abode, I would like to talk about, again, houses. People live in houses. In the world, people build houses to live in. The better a person can afford, generally, the better they will build. Some people can afford just basic houses, rudimentary or prefab, or even less than that. And others can build quite sturdy or expansive or grand houses. But the simple reason for building a house is to be safe from dangers. If you think about it, if we don't have proper housing, we'll be exposed to the sun, or to the rain, or to the wind, to creeping and crawling things that can bite, enemies, and even accidentally, we could get harmed. If we're living out in the open and someone happens to throw a rock, it might hit us if we don't have any protective housing, even if they didn't intend to harm us. So a house gives us protection against dangers that exist in the world. And in samsara, there are dangers too. And the dangers that can come during samsara are far greater than the worldly dangers. And they are immense because our lives, being born and dying countless times, it can be quite a long time. So the dangers are to be reborn in the 4 lower realms, as you probably know. Some of you, I'm sure, can recite what they are. Can anyone tell me? The 4 lower realms are? Okay, you're probably all muted. So I will say the hell realms, and then there's the realms of the hungry ghosts, there's the realms of the realm of the angry ghosts, and there's the animal realm. So these are the 4 lower realms. And in samsara, we could also, even if we're not reborn in one of those realms, we could be reborn in a low, in a poor, very poor existence as a human, where we have to work hard for a living and where we are in danger of being mistreated by others. There are many types of circumstances that people have to live in that involve a lot of suffering. Even if we're reborn as a wealthy person who has all they need materially, still, everybody has to age, get sick, and die. And throughout samsara, this happens again and again and again, except for the Buddhas and the Arahants. The Buddhas and the Arahants who meditate, they dwell in the abodes of the noble ones, and they are free from the dangers of samsara. So the reason why the Buddha gave this on the Ariyavasa is to urge everyone to build their own abode of the noble ones and live there in safety, free from samsaric dangers. So as you can see, the first abode, let me find my Pali. The first abode, Panchanga Vipaheno Hoti. A person has removed this first abode of the noble ones. It has removed 5 parts. So just the Buddha says this. We don't really know what that means. We don't know what these 5 parts are, and we don't know how to remove them yet. But this is for us to think about. And then you see Chalanga Samanagato, to be endowed with 6 parts, just like a house has windows, doors, walls, roof, beams, posts, and so on. An Arya dwelling or an abode of the noble ones has 6 parts. And it has a single guard, Ekarako Hoti. So we know that in the world, we have a lot of places, there are guards, bodyguards, security guards, and so on. And people do this to be free of danger. They don't want danger to come into the house, don't want thieves to come in or whatever. And for us in samsara, we need to keep our minds safe from the dangers of the defilements. So we also need a guard. Then this house, the abodes of the noble ones, it has 4 supports. And then number 5 is, I'm not going to explain it in detail, but it means that when you compare, there are many beliefs in the world, and some of them are not founded in reality. And those are what are called independent varieties of views. they're things that people think up, but they don't have a basis in ultimate reality. When you compare them with the way things really are, they don't stand up to examination. And then the sixth one, setesino, to have given up all seeking. Well, if we're searching for something, it means we are not complete. So this abode is having given up all seeking. There's no more need to search for anything. And then number 7, for one's intention to have been purified, to have unmuddied thought. This is also a very good dwelling. And then pasadakaya sankaro hoti. It means 2 things. This actually means when people have jhana, the in-breath and the out-breath get stopped. And actually, it doesn't mean that a noble abode is to have the 4th jhana. It really means that the noble abode is arahantship. That's actually what it means here. I can't explain why. I'm sorry, because I won't have time to say everything else. And then the last 2 abodes, the mind has been completely liberated. And then there is the wisdom, the knowledge that one is completely liberated. So if we follow this list, then we should start with number 1. Remove 5 parts and end with number 10. But in practice, what we begin with is number 3, to place a single guard. And the Ariyavasa Sutta is easier to understand if we begin with talking about this guard. And what to have a single guard, it means to have a mind that has the protection of mindfulness or awareness, right, as you know, called in Pali sati. And this means that awareness follows every single arising mind. Every single moment of consciousness that arises in us is followed by awareness. Just the way a guard, for example, a bodyguard, will protect an important person, staying with that person all the time. So only an arahant is fully endowed with awareness. An arahant has awareness that is present with every single act, every single word spoken, every single thought, before sleeping, on awakening, 100% mindful. Well, how does an arahant get this good mindfulness? Does it just fall out of the sky when he becomes an arahant or she becomes an arahant? No, it's developed gradually. Before becoming an arahant, a person has to reach anagamihood. And from that point, practice. An anagami still has very good sati, very good mindfulness. But still, the person continues to practice vipassana or satipatthana until complete purification at the stage of arahantship. And that anagami, having very good sati, that is developed because before being an anagami, a person has to realize sakadagamihood, the stage of once returning. And from that point on, they must continue to practice. And all the while they practice, the mindfulness keeps on developing moment by moment. And through their they continue to practice and build their sati. So it is, when a person, even before a person reaches the second stage of enlightenment, as a sotapanna, still the awareness is still very good, and a person has to practice to go further and become a sakadagami. So if we think about it, an arahant is 100% mindful. An anagami has 75% of awareness power. Once returner or sakadagami has 50% of the potential development of awareness. And a sotapanna or stream enterer has about 25%. But still, so if you compare the awareness of a sotapanna with that of an unenlightened person, it's much, much, much better. So a sotapanna still has sense desires, and they still have ill will. I'm trying to describe how sati works with this. So sotapannas, although they've reached the first stage of enlightenment, they still have sense desires and still have anger and ill will and still have delusion, conceit, and so on. But they can have other unwholesome attitudes, other defilements can arise. But these aren't strong enough to bring about the acts of killing or stealing. The degree to which unwholesomeness can arise in their mind is reduced. And this is because their awareness is strong. The awareness follows and acts like a control with everything that they do. And I think meditators are probably aware of this phenomena, how mindfulness acts as a control, follows the different things that arise in us. How it happens is when we see something desirable, and immediately sense desire arises because we're not free of it yet. Even as a sotapanna, I'm not speaking as if I am, I'm just saying, please understand that. I'm just saying a sotapanna, still the sense desire will arise because they're not free of it. Or seeing something angering, the anger will arise immediately because the person is not yet free of that. But if the anger or greed becomes stronger, then sati follows that and restrains it. It interrupts the flow. Our awareness of it interrupts the flow of greed, the flow of anger, and they lose their momentum and they fall away. So this is why the Buddha declared that a sotapanna, a stream enterer, no longer does any unwholesome deeds that lead to the lower realms and will no longer take the life of another. They're completely established in the practice of morality, that is the 5 precepts. So this is the benefit of having strong sati, that we are protected from rebirth in the 4 realms of the 4 lower realms. So why a sotapanna's awareness is good, is so strong, is because of constant development. From the time of undertaking the Vipassana practice as an unenlightened being, strong sati, strong awareness begins with practice as an unenlightened being. And that sati is what we call satipatthana, what notes every arising, at every phenomena that comes up at the 6 sense doors. Satipatthana is very exceptional awareness. And it simply is making a note of every arising physical or mental phenomenon. It's a very simple thing. So, as I said, it is the observation, satipatthana is the observation of every arising object at the 6 sense doors. But before we can do that, we have to start with gross bodily movement. And in particular with the Mahasi method, we start with the movement of the abdomen that are caused by the air element, which are noted as rising and falling. And after we begin to note that, then we come to notice the thoughts. Thoughts arise in between these rising and falling movements. As we continue to practice, in time, there are discomfort, uncomfortable feelings that arise. And those are Vedana. And those also have to be noted, just as thoughts have to be noted every time they occur. Same with Vedanas or feelings, pain or pleasant or whatever. They have to be noted every time they arise. And then also there are physical gestures, the motions that we make every time they occur. And if a yogi does this diligently, according to these instructions, then they become aware. They come to be aware of every single physical and mental phenomena that arises when they're seeing or hearing, smelling, tasting and eating, touching, bending, stretching, moving, changing their posture, thinking. So this is the third. This is to have a mind that is that possesses the guard of sati. Sata rekena cetasa samanagato. So I probably don't need to continue to say this, but therefore, our development of awareness begins from the moment that we begin to practice. And as we continue to practice Vipassana, it becomes better and better until it reaches the strong enough point to the mind becomes pure enough for long enough. Then we realize Sotapannahood. And continuing to practice, the awareness becomes even better till the point of realization of the second stage of enlightenment. From that point, continuing to practice, the awareness becoming better and better, and reaching the stage of anagamihood. And then continuing to practice, developing the awareness further and further until it is totally developed as an arahant. So in an arahant, there are no lapses of awareness. There are no moments of negligence. There is. So this is why the Buddha said that this is one of the noble abodes, ida bhikkhave bhikkhu, satarakena cetasa samanagato hoti. That in this teaching, O monk, a monk or a person who sees danger in the cycle of existence, samsara, or a person who destroys the kilesas, is endowed with a mind that has the protection of awareness. So just like a guard at your house, the guard of awareness should accompany every moment of consciousness. So we should think about it. Okay? In 1 hour, how many moments do we have the guard of awareness with us? Don't have any awareness guard. We should put one. We should place one in our mental house. And if we only have a small number of moments of awareness in an hour, we should try to place more. And because without the protection of awareness, we cannot even become the lowest level of enlightened being, which is the Sotapanna. And a little verse that I think is good about the Vipassana principle is to note and know at every arising, always guard the mind. You can say it even add at the end, note and know at every arising, always guard the mind with vigilant mindfulness. So if we do this, we try to observe every seeing, smelling, hearing, taste, touch, and so on, every ache, every itch, every pain we feel, every time of being upset or happy, all these things are to be noted. And if we do this, we have the guard of awareness. And as much as we can develop awareness, our concentration will develop. When awareness and concentration develop, our knowledge will develop accordingly. And finally, we develop awareness that misses nothing. And this is what it means to be complete with a security guard. That is one of the abodes of the noble ones, and we should try to live in that dwelling. So in samsara, we've already suffered a lot. And now, when we have the chance, needing the teaching of the Buddha, we should try to build these noble dwellings, these Ariyavasa, and live there in safety. So there's a question that arises. Can you guess? Okay, the question is, can we live in the abode of the noble ones if we are not yet enlightened? This is a good question. Well, if you think about it, you might not own your own home, but you can rent one, right? You can even go to a hotel for a day or a week. You can rent by the month or a year. As long as you can pay, you can live there. And it's the same way with the abodes of the noble ones. If we can pay the price, we can stay there, even if we aren't enlightened yet. So what price do we have to pay? You probably can guess. We have to have faith that doing this practice is going to be beneficial. That's the first investment we have to make to be able to live in the abodes of the noble ones. And then there has to be willingness, strong will to do the practice, and effort that is vigorous and doesn't let up. A person who has these three qualities of faith, willingness, and effort, called in Pali saddha, chanda, and virya, they will try to note every action they make. Especially you have to go on retreat to really have a good opportunity, but people can do it in lay life too. So with these three qualities, a person will try to know every moment. And each note that we make gets us into the abode of the noble ones. With every moment of noting that we have, we are living in the abode of the noble ones. So if we keep on noting, we can continue to live there. So Mahasi Sayadaw said, this is the method for living in a big house without paying any money. So what is the benefit of meditating and living in the abodes of the noble ones? It is to be free of being reborn in hell and other lower realms. For an example of this is the story of Tambadatika, who was an executioner. And his name means that he had his eye teeth, which are like fangs on an animal. They were like pillars. They were huge. He was a really horrifying looking person. And he had been a thief. And when he was caught, he was given the offer by the king. The king said, you can live if you will become the executioner, the chief executioner. And so he agreed. So his job was to kill people who were condemned to death with an axe. And he did that for 55 years, every day. The first day he had to kill 2,500 thieves. He had to kill many, many thieves to begin with. And then later on, it was only 1 or 2 or 3 a day that he would have to kill. But when he got older, he wasn't able to do it effectively anymore. So he had to retire after 55 years. And as an executioner, he wasn't allowed to wear nice clothes, like all white, never worn before, pristine clothes. He wasn't allowed to put a special flower in his hair, and he wasn't allowed to have rice porridge, because the work of being executioner was so gross that people didn't think it was appropriate for them to have these things that were so refined. So he always wanted to wear white new clothes and put flowers in his hair and have rice porridge, milk rice porridge. So he arranged on his retirement day, he arranged to have all these things. And as he was about to eat his meal, having washed and put on these clothes and then put the flowers in his hair, the Venerable Sariputra arrived. And the Tambadatika saw him, and he felt faith. He felt inspired, and he immediately offered his milk rice porridge to the Venerable Sariputra instead of eating it himself. And then he sat there fanning the Venerable. But he began to feel hungry. He wished he could have some of the porridge. And the Venerable Sariputra knew this. So he gave him some. He said, here, go and eat it. And then he could eat the porridge himself. When he finished eating, he came back and the Venerable Sariputra began to give a Dhamma talk. But as his mind quieted down, he remembered what he'd been doing for the last 55 years, and he wasn't able to concentrate. The Venerable Sariputra knew this, and he asked him, why aren't you able to listen to my Dhamma talk? And he said, sir, your Dhamma talk is very good. There is nothing wrong with it. But I remember the misdeeds that I've done, and so I don't feel happy. So the Venerable Sariputra said, when you were executing people as your executioner, did you do it because you wanted to? Or did you do it because you were ordered to do so? Was it your own volition? Or was it because the king ordered you to do so? And Tamadatika was not very intelligent. So he thought, oh, that's right. I mean, he said, well, before that, he answered the Venerable Sariputra. He said, no, how would I want to do it? But I did it because the king ordered me to do it. It wasn't that I wanted to do it myself. And so then the Venerable Sariputra asked him, well, then are they really your misdeeds? Is it your akusala? Is it your unwholesomeness? Can you call it that? And Tambadatika thought, no, it's the king's. It's the king's. The king ordered me. It's his problem, not mine. So he felt comfortable and at ease. He could let it go. He could forget about the misdeeds. Even though, in fact, having done them, they were his deeds, But his mind became calm. He stopped worrying about it, and he could listen to the Dhamma talk. And when he listened to the Venerable Sariputra preach, he developed Vipassana knowledge all the way up to the knowledge Anuloma Jnana, just before realization of enlightenment as a streamliner. And at that point, the Venerable Sariputra concluded the talk, and the Tambadatika escorted him back to the monastery. And then when he was returning to his own home, he was gored. He was gored by a cow. That is, he was gored by an ogre in disguise as a cow who was taking revenge on him, and he died. So he didn't get to practice the Sotapannahood, but because of his state of mind, because he had reached that level of enlightenment and his mind was in such a pure condition, when he died, he went to the Deva realms. So it's really amazing. 55 years as an executioner, but because he could listen to the Dhamma at right before the final moments of his life and develop knowledge through the practice, instead of going to hell, which would have happened, he went to the Deva realms. And this is because he had the guard of sati, the guard of awareness. His evil deeds were ready to drag him down to hell, but he had acquired the guard of mindfulness. So, when he listened to the Venerable Sariputra, and the Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw made this comparison. He said, it's just like when a person runs into a foreign embassy. The police can't catch him. That's exactly the way it is when you have this abode of the noble ones, that is the guard of awareness. You're in the abode of the noble ones, your kilesas, your defilements, your akusala cannot get you. So even the evil past karma cannot pull us down when we are protected by Shakti. So this is the benefit that we have, and we have it all the while we are developing our mindfulness. And okay, I would like, how much more time do we have if I could just ask our,
I think at least 15 to 20 more minutes for the Dhamma and Q.
Okay, fine. Okay, so that is about these, to have a single guard, the third quality, the third abode of the noble ones. So the fourth is to have four supports. And there are four things that support us as we try to develop awareness as our noble abode. There are four supports for this. And in Pali it is said, Sankayekang pati sevati, Sankayekang adivaseti, Sankayekang parivajeti, Sankayekang vinodeti. So that is, the first support is to reflect on our four requisites before we use them. So this is when we, for monks or nuns, to reflect before eating food, reflect on the use of clothing before we wear it, when we wear it, to reflect on the use of our shelter, and to reflect on the use of medicine. That the clothing we wear is for keeping away the cold, keeping away the heat, keeping away the touch of biting and stinging things, and for covering up our bareness that would make us ashamed otherwise. When we eat our food, we have to reflect that it is not for pleasure, not for intoxication, not for being kind of proud. We can eat this food, not to make ourselves fat, not to make ourselves beautiful, but only for keeping the body alive and healthy so that we can support the holy life. When we reflect like this, we can overcome the feelings of hunger without causing new painful feelings to arise. And in this way, we live in purity and ease. And the shelter is also the place where we live, no matter how good or bad it is. It is shelter to protect us from cold, heat, from stinging things, biting things, and to give us seclusion. And the medicines we use are for overcoming the disease and for overcoming the painful feelings of disease. So this is just one support, and also to tolerate discomforts is the second. Sankayekang adivaseti. So things like heat and cold, or unpleasant pains, unpleasant sounds that we might hear in the environment when we practice, unpleasant speech. These are things that are minor in comparison with the benefit we can get when we practice. So we have to reflect reflect on this discomfort and tolerate it. Then there are things that should be reflected on and avoided. If I go to this place, for example, in Burma, of course, there are places where there are lots of wild dogs. Sometimes the dogs that are on the streets will bite. So you avoid the place where the dog might bite. You avoid going to the edge of the cliff. You might fall off to the edge of the cliff. You might fall into it. Avoid going to a place that is really busy with cars. You might get hit. So to reflect and avoid things that are dangerous, that should be avoided. And then some things are to be reflected on and rejected. Thoughts about sense pleasures, thoughts about hurting others, thoughts of anger, thoughts others vihimsa vitaka. So these are the four supports. to reflect on things and use them or tolerate them, avoid them, or reject them. And then there's the first, we'll go to the first from here, which is to remove 5 parts. So what are these 5 parts that have to be removed as we try to develop our awareness with the practice? We have to remove the hindrances to our practice, the nivaranas. These things block our practice, just like placing a big door in our way and shutting it. That's how the hindrances block our development of the practice. So the first of these is the desire for sense pleasures, kama chanda nivarana. And so this type of, I'm not sure where to start with this, but this is compared to, having the feeling of liking and desiring something, liking and wanting. This is what that quality is of sense pleasure. And it's like a debt. When we want something, it's like going into debt. And we should remove that debt right away. Okay, the analogy is that when a person goes into debt, then the person who owes the money has to be deferential to the lender. And when a person can't pay on time, they have to plead. They have to plead for more time. Some people have to go in hiding to avoid being killed if they are in debt to the wrong person. So the debtor has to put up with the treatment that he receives from the lender, and doesn't have much recourse. So so it's a bad situation. If we're in debt, how can we be happy? So we have to try to get rid of a debt if we're in debt. And in the analogy, the thing that we like is like the lender. We have to be careful. We want to try to please that person. We have to be conciliatory. Or, for example, if it's a cup of coffee or something like that we have to have in the morning, that it's like that desire that we have causes us to fulfill it. We have the desire, so we have to please it, by making ourselves a cup of coffee or tea or whatever it is. And that is the debtor, of course, is the person who has liking, and then the debt is the liking itself. So how do we remove it? Well, before we think about removing it, I'd like to talk about, well, what is it we desire? Everybody likes good things, good things to see, hear, smell, taste, touch. And these are desirable sense objects. So a desirable sense object is like a piece of meat. Sometimes you might see a bird that has a piece of meat, and when one bird has that piece of meat, the other birds all want it because it's desirable. They want to eat it. They want to have it. So they gather around that bird who has the meat, and they peck and peck and peck until finally the first bird drops the meat, and then another one picks it up. And then the same thing happens. The other birds gather around, peck, 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 beat, 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 try to beat at them with their wings and claw and so on. And then the bird who has the meat can't stand it anymore, so he drops the meat. So this is the defect. This is what's wrong with one of the things that's wrong about sense pleasures. Everybody wants them, and they can be this is a drawback to have them sometimes. So everybody likes them and wants them, but the wise see the defects of them and give them up. So it's said that liking, it's good to remember, what the defects are of these hindrances, so that we don't entertain them, so that we don't think that they're a good thing. So the analogy is that liking and wanting is like death. We move it right away. So when we are meditating, we have to note sense desire every time it arises, according to the verse, which I mentioned before. Note and know at every arising, always guard the mind. If the desire arises once, we note it. If it arises twice, we note it twice. 3 times, we note it 3 times. However many notings it takes to overcome it as we practice, we need to note it that many times. Eventually, if we are persistent, if we are persevering in noting it, it will go away. So we have to kind of think of it like a battle, that when the sense desire comes up, we just have to note it. We have to note it, and if we keep on noting it, it will eventually disappear. And after our desire goes away, when we look back to the original source of our desire, the original thing that we liked and wanted, the liking and desire doesn't arise. It's subdued. So if we cannot remove this debt of liking, then we cannot dwell in the abode of the noble one. Okay. Sayadaw made the point. He's not talking about in daily life. Of course, we have likes and dislikes that arise like that. But when we're practicing, it's essential to note them. It's not easy to, you can't just note them very easily in our daily life. So if we can note, observe, and know the liking and wanting that arises, then we can remove it. But if we can remove it, we can dwell in the abode of the noble ones and be safe from the dangers of apaya. If we happen to die with this outstanding debt of liking, then we are likely to fall into the 4 lower realms of apaya. For example, the animal realm. It's possible. Why that is because we are not living in a noble house. We are living in the house of worldlings, which is not secure. It's like living in a dilapidated house, a shack. We're living out in the open. When you live out in the open, you're exposed to the elements and dangers. And if we live in the worldling's house, we're exposed to the dangers of apaya. So I would like to tell a story briefly. Some of you may know it and some of you may not, but the story of a monk and a louse. You all know what a louse is. It's a small animal, small insect. In the Buddhist time, there was a monk named Tisa, and he received a robe one day, and he was very pleased with it because it wasn't like anything he had received before, and he really prized it. He washed it, he hung it up, and he was looking forward to wearing it the next day. He was feeling very pleased with it. And as it happened, as he was in bed feeling pleased with the robe, he fell sick and died. With that feeling of being pleased with the robe still in his mind. So he had no moral fault at the time of death. And because of having such pure sila as a monk, he should have gone to the celestial realms. But he died with desire for that robe. And therefore, he was reborn as a big louse on that very robe. So why did he become a louse? It was because he was residing in the house of worldlings. That is, to just stay with the feeling of desiring and liking the robe. That's the worldling's house. It's not the abode of the noble ones. To reside in the abode of the noble ones would mean that he had observed the sense desire, liking, cherishing. And that, or even as a minimum, reflecting as the monks do on the requisites, as I mentioned before, to reflect on what is for protection from cold, heat, and so on. The Buddha also gave the method of the Subha Bhavana for removing desire. But the best way is to note the liking and desire when it arises and removes it. And if we note persistently that desire, that cherishing, the wanting will go away. Now, the feeling may not have gone away yet, but as long as we are noting it, we are residing in the abode of the noble ones already, as we note. So we have to remember this, that these things arise in our minds, but our observation of them is what is important. And that's a digression to say that, but we should also think about, for a monk only has 4 kinds of requisites. And if a monk went to the animal world because of attachment to his one set of robes, then think of how many things we have. All of these are grounds for us to feel attachment. So we have to try before we die to build our abode of the noble one. And we need to expend a few things. We need to spend money to buy our house in the noble ones, which is we need faith to do the practice. We need to invest our faith and our willingness and our effort. So if we have time, I will describe the other 5 hindrances. It's just a little bit more. And then we can stop. So to continue, it takes the faith, effort, and faith, willingness, and effort to apply the practice so that we can build our strong sati. We have to remove our nivaranas. Before any concentration can arise, the nivaranas have to be removed. So it's really important to recognize them and to note them whenever, persistently when they arrive. It's said that anger and its flip side is disappointment, dejection. It's like a disease. We have to suppress and eradicate it. So we can see, I'm not going to say very much about this because there's not much time, but when we see something we dislike, something dislikable, then naturally there's disappointment and anger. And this feeling leads us to quarrel. And who we quarrel with is usually our neighbors, our household and our neighbors. It's hard to have a fight with somebody who's far away, although that happens too. Usually we quarrel with people who are close to us, and paradoxically, those who are closest to us are the ones whose support we need. So we should really try to, when we recognize that there's a dislikable object, dejection, anger has come up, we should try to note it persistently until it goes away. Anger is what can break the goodwill that we need to live with each other. And so it's important to overcome it. Then there's tinamida, dull, lazy sluggishness. It's like being put in jail because we can't enjoy the taste of the Dhamma. Our practice won't develop if we just, are dull and lazy, or if we are too lazy even to undertake the practice. So we have to try to note the dull feeling, the lazy feeling, the sleepy feeling, and remove it. Then there's restlessness and worry. Restlessness and worry make us our slave, so we have to remove them quickly. And the final one is skeptical doubt, which is like a fork in the road. So the analogy for this is that when a merchant is traveling through an area that he or she doesn't know, carrying goods that he's going to sell, he's heard that there are thieves in the vicinity. And walking along, the merchant comes to a fork in the road. Which way to go? The merchant doesn't know because he hasn't ever gone that road before. Like us when we practice, we haven't gone the road before. If we haven't done the practice before and developed knowledge before, and we don't know it, and we have to just have confidence that we're going along, that the practice leads to the things that we've heard about. But doubt can arise because we've never done it before. So we wonder, is it true or not? In the same way, the merchant at the fork in the road is wondering which way to go. If there are thieves, which way will I escape the thieves? Go to the left or go to the right? And if he just stands there, the thieves catch up, steal his goods, and kill him. So it's the same thing with our practice. If we stop to wonder about whether or not this practice is going to be beneficial or not, will it really be like our teachers say, etc., then a person doesn't practice. So that's why it's important to note and overcome. In conclusion, I would like to say that the abodes of the Noble One, although the Buddha described 10, if you just develop the guard of awareness, all the other 5 parts, all the other 10 parts will be accomplished. So this is the most important thing. And it is also what the Buddha reminded us in his final words. He said, Vaya Dhamma Sankara, Apamadena Sampadeta. So he reminded his disciples, just like when your parents, if your parents have passed away and you were with them, or, this is the typical, when parents die, they want to tell their children, what they think is most important, should they have the chance. Likewise, the Buddha told his disciples that all conditioned phenomena have the nature to pass away. So develop the 3 trainings, Sila, Samadhi, and Panya, with vigilant mindfulness, Apamadena, to never be without awareness. So that was the Buddha's main point, to always dwell with awareness. And same with this sutta. So I hope that you all will be able to develop awareness to the fullest extent. If not in this very life, then as soon as possible, and realize the peace and happiness of Nibbana. That's all for tonight.
Sadhu,
Sadhu,
sadhu.
sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Sayagyi. I will open it up to the members. If there are any questions, we can do a few minutes of Q&A.
That's fine, thanks.
Feel free to unmute yourself if you can, or raise your hand.
Should I take away my spotlight so that I can see everybody?
Can you see everyone now, Sayagyi?
Well, if you, yeah, I can't see everybody because I can only see side by side with
I can stop to share momentarily.
Yeah, if you do that, then I'll see people. Could you follow what I was saying? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. Did you hear this talk before?
No.
Okay.
Anyone have any thoughts to share or comments?
Sayagyi, this is Lompi Theravamsa. It used to be Talungsak. I guess,
yes.
We really appreciate you for making the time to share the Dharma. And I remember the last time I saw you was in Myanmar, long time ago on my retreat, and that was the last time I saw you. So we are very happy to see you again, and just want to express our gratitude for your wisdom.
Bhante, congratulations on becoming a monk, and good luck. Yeah. And I'm happy to see you again. Yes, I remember the last time I saw you in Myanmar.
Yeah, you took care of me very well. Thank you.
I tried. So you can let me know if you need something, and I can.
Thank you.
So I wanted to talk about this, even if nobody has anything to say immediately. because you can see the importance of having awareness. You can see the difference between the way these two beings died. The executioner, because his mind was pure, he had the protection of sati. His whatever bad deeds he had done, they couldn't drag him down. And the monk, on the other hand, had great purity of sila, but because he didn't, he didn't observe that liking that he had for the robe, then he unfortunately lost his, he went from being a human to being an animal. However, in the end, he didn't live that long as a louse. He lived about 7 days. And then, actually, as the story goes, he was running, and when a monk dies, they have to divvy up his possessions. The Sangha comes. And the louse was running back and forth on the robe. They're going to take away my robe. They're going to take away my robe. And the Buddha saw that. So he said, just leave it for 7 days. And so the louse didn't have his robe taken away from him. And when he did die from that life, he was reflecting on his life as a monk. He was remembering his life as a monk. And so he went to the Deva realms. So that was a good ending. So you can see just the habits that we developed. If we have the habit of being aware of our body as we move, as we are walking, just to keep the basic awareness of our posture, try to come back to that, whether we're walking or standing, sitting or lying down. If we can come back to that many times during the day, that builds our house, our noble house, so that it will protect us more and more. So that's why I think these stories are so good.